morning, everybody. It's Friday and welcome to the Vicarage. Lovely to see you and thank you for joining us for our Bible talk for today. And whether you're watching in Penn, whether you're watching in Tamworth, wherever you may be, you're very, very welcome. Just to remind you, if I may, as it's Friday, that we have lots of services going on, both in Tamworth and in Penn this weekend, and you'd be very, very welcome. Do join us for worship. We'd love to see you, and we'd be a better church with you in it, as I always say. Friends, we are working our way through the letter of Paul to the Galatians, one of my favourite books of the Bible. I always say Paul at his most Paulish, if you know what I mean. And we're now in chapter 2, and we are moving on now from chapter 2, verse 11 to the end of the chapter. So without further ado, here we go. Galatians chapter 2, starting to read at verse 11. Paul writes, "But when Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood self-condemned. For until certain people came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles. But after they came, he drew back and kept himself separate for fear of the circumcision faction. And the other Jews joined him in this hypocrisy, so that even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. But when I saw that they were not acting consistently with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas before them all, 'If you, though a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like a Jew, how can you compel the Gentiles to live like Jews? We ourselves are Jews by birth and not Gentile sinners. Yet we know that a person is justified not by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. And we've come to believe in Christ Jesus, so that we might be justified by faith in Christ and not by doing the works of the law, because no one will be justified by the works of the law. But if in our effort to be justified in Christ, we ourselves have been found to be sinners, is Christ then a servant of sin? Certainly not. But if I build up again the very things that I once tore down, then I demonstrate that I'm a transgressor. For through the law I died to the law, so I might live to God. I have been crucified with Christ, and it's no longer I who live, but it's Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not nullify the grace of God, for if justification comes through the law, then Christ died for nothing." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, back to chronology again. Just to remind you, Paul met Jesus on the Damascus Road, and they went to Damascus after that, obviously. Then he spent 3 years in Arabia before going to Jerusalem for the first time, meeting Peter and James. He then spent a further 14 years in Syria before going to Jerusalem. But the incident he's talking about is because later he moves on to a place called Antioch. In case you've always wondered, Antioch is there. That's Antioch there. And Paul essentially becomes based in Antioch from kind of there on in. Paul goes on 3 missionary journeys and they all start at Antioch. It's kind of where he gets based. That's where he kind of sets up his base from. Now, the big debate at the time, over the years, there have been many debates. Some there were, 500 years ago, it was what's meant by the Eucharist. 100 years ago, it was contraception. Recently, it was women priests or women bishops, or whatever it will be. The big debate at the time of Paul was whether Gentile people can become Christians. Bear in mind, obviously, the early Christians were all Jews. The apostles were Jews. Paul was a Jew. They were all Jews from the beginning. Would non-Jews also be able to become Christians? And if they did become Christians, how many of the kind of Jewish food laws and so on would they be expected to take on? That was the kind of the big debate at the time. Now in Jerusalem, in kind of head office, you might say, they tended to feel more strongly over there that actually it was a Jewish thing, and that Christians who become Jews, who weren't Christians before, should start taking lots and lots of the circumcision and the food laws and that sort of stuff. Whereas Paul, of course, when he met Jesus on the Damascus Road, was called very, very clear to go and preach to the Gentiles, and felt very, very passionately that Gentiles who became Christians shouldn't have to take on some of the food laws, if you follow me. So you've got Jerusalem in the south, where there tend to be more Jewish Christians, if you know what I mean, Jewish eyes, if you know what I mean. Whereas in Antioch in the north, Paul and his friends felt very strongly that they shouldn't. And Peter had obviously been to Antioch, and Peter had obviously been eating with Christians who hadn't become Jews before, and he'd eaten with Gentiles and so on. And the incident that Paul is talking about here is that some people from head office from Jerusalem, the James party and so on, had obviously gone to Antioch. And when these people arrived, Peter and some of the original Jewish Christians in Antioch had decided we better just leave the Gentiles alone for a while to keep these people happy. Got to keep them happy in head office, that kind of thing, and not done it. And Paul here is criticising Peter for being a hypocrite, because he's saying on the one hand you're eating with Gentiles and you're doing all the right things. On the other hand, when this lot turn up, you seem to be saying something different. But Paul, as you know, as you'll discover all through his life, one of the things Paul felt extremely passionate about is that non-Jews can also become Christians. And which actually means, you're thinking, what's that got to do with you and I? It means that people like you and I can have faith in Jesus today. That we don't have to go through the Jewish rituals ourselves today, and that people who weren't born Jewish can have faith, people like you and me. So I think actually today we should thank God for Paul and people like him at Antioch who actually made it, prepared the way so that you and I can become Christians too. So I want to say today, thank God for Paul in this way and in lots of ways as well, because it means that we can enjoy the Christian faith too. Which brings us to the second paragraph, which is all about how we are saved, how we are saved from sin, how we are saved from death, how we are saved from hell and that sort of stuff, how we are saved into life and how it happens. And Paul is saying very, very strongly to the Gentiles here that we are not saved by doing the works of the law, but we are saved by faith in Jesus Christ. Because he's basically saying, if we can be saved by doing the works of the law, then Jesus needn't to bother dying for us. Then God needn't to send Jesus, because actually, Jesus needn't to die for us, because actually, if we could be saved by doing good stuff, then Jesus wouldn't have had to go through the cross. He'd have simply had to say to us, live it better, do X, Y, and Z, and you will be saved, if you know what I mean. But we clearly can't. And so because we can't be saved by pulling by our bootstraps, because we can't be saved by doing lots of good stuff, it means that Jesus had to die for us. So if we can be saved by doing good stuff, it means that Jesus would have died in vain, and he didn't. So Paul is absolutely massively clear. We cannot save ourselves by doing good things. We are saved by having faith in Jesus Christ. Paul is absolutely massive about this. It doesn't matter how many good things you do, you're never going to do enough, all right? Because we need Jesus Christ. We have faith in Jesus. That is how we are saved, and that's the only way we can be saved, by faith in him. And Paul is really, really clear about that. We're not saved by works of the law, we are saved by faith, because otherwise we just can't do it. That's the second thing. So we're not saved by works, we're saved by faith. Which brings us to the third point, which has become very big in recent times, because the word faith in Christ, Greek it means pistis theo, it means faith in God. All right, pistis theo means faith in God. We are saved not by works, we're saved by pistis theo, by faith in God, or pistis Christou, faith in Christ. The thing is, though, the word faith, right, pistis, can mean faith, but it can also mean faithfulness. And Christou, or theo, can mean in God or in Christ, but it can also mean of Christ or of God as well. So pistis Christou can mean faith in Christ. It can also mean the faithfulness of Christ. And there's been big issues in recent years, big debates in big theological college recently, that are we saved by faith in Christ, or are we saved by the faithfulness of Christ, right? There's been much debate about it in recent times, except to say that I'm a simple man, and I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and. I think we are saved by faith in Christ, but I think, of course, we are saved by the faithfulness of Christ. We are saved not by what we do, but by Jesus' faithfulness, by what he did for us. We're not saved by works of the law. We are saved by believing in what Jesus has done for us. It's not about what we do for him, it's what he has done for us. What we do for him, we simply do in response to what he has done for us. So I hope that makes sense. 3 things from this morning's reading, okay? Firstly, we can thank God for Paul, who made it so that Gentiles like you and I can enjoy the Christian faith too, and stood up against people like James and some of the others at the time, and even Peter at that time as well. He stood up for what is right. He stood up for the fact that you and I, the Gentiles, can enjoy the Christian faith too. And I say, thank God for that. Secondly, we are not saved by the good things we do. We are saved by having faith in Jesus. And are we saved by having faith in Jesus, or are we saved by the faithfulness of Jesus? I think it's both. We're saved by having faith in what he did for us. Good Church of England answer possibly, because it says both and. But I think that's great, and I think that's right. Hope that makes sense, my friends. It takes a bit of getting your head out. Listen to it again, read it again at your leisure, and take it in. It's wonderful reading.